So we cannot stop farming and Blizzard cannot stop, well, nerfing everything into the ground. Today we have a brand new patch which seems to further nerf a lot of the elite spawns in many of the dungeons that we farmed for. But I'm also going to go over a very quick method to power level any character all the way to World Tier 4 in no more than 1 hour. Let's get started with the various XP mechanics and multipliers that will further help you to level up faster. Of course, this assumes that you're already on World Tier 4 and already are getting that 200% XP modifier from the Torment difficulty. But outside of that, there are quite a few more on top, including how far above you in levels are your enemies. So in Diablo 4, the maximum XP multiplier you can get for fighting enemies higher level than you is just 25% for monsters that are 3 or more levels above your character. This means that as long as these enemies you're fighting are just 3 levels over your character, you are already getting that bonus 25% XP on top. However, once you exceed that third level above your character, you're not really seeing any benefit, but the monsters do get increasingly more difficult. So if, for example, you're trying to defeat monsters 10 levels above your character or 20 levels, you're really not seeing any benefit in terms of XP gains, and even more so, you're in danger of just wasting time, resources, and unnecessarily dying. So that's why I recommend going no more than 5 levels above your character, just in case you do manage to level up during that instance. On top of this, we also have the boosts. This includes the one coming from the elixirs, which is a nice 5% for 30 minutes. Also, the second one, which I also recommend stacking, is by just being in a party with a player. This gives you another 15% extra XP as long as you're not going too far from one another. You can see from this footage right here that I didn't even need to go too far away from my other character for the XP buff from the party to completely fade away, and I was like just a few meters away, just past the corner. So you do have to play together, literally. There's an additional third one coming from campfires actually, which also gives you another stacking 15% bonus XP on top. However, this only works prior to certain open world events such as the Gathering Legions. So during one of these events, there's going to be a countdown timer on the map. Then once you go to the meeting spot, you can go ahead, interact with that campfire, and it's going to give you a stacking buff that after 2 minutes will give you the maximum of that 15% XP on top. But it only works in that location and for that event only, which is why I didn't focus on it too much. But now that you're equipped with this knowledge, let's talk about some of my favorite new locations post the new nerfs. So one of them is the Blind Burrows, which is a series of caves you can find right here in the Howitzer region, and actually this can also be turned into a nightmare dungeon if you have the sigil. In this case, this is actually a very simple layout of a dungeon that you can follow, which is going to give you a ton of these spider-like enemies. And as you defeat these spider enemies, a lot more will spawn out of them, which is going to give you a lot more XP and more chances at loot. There's a decent number of elite groups that are quite massive in size, and as you defeat more of these bipedal ones, more of the spiders will spawn out of them. Even more so, quite a number of events inside, and the objective is always going to be on the top corner of the screen, so you always know exactly where to navigate. The only, I would say, kind of difficulty here is the fact that there's going to be a lot of poison damage happening, and even more so poison explosions, so you kind of do have to prepare for that, maybe get some poison resistance or maybe some barriers, and just overall be a little bit tanky. The next one is the Ghoul Run Canals, which you find right here in the dry steppes around the center part of the map. And actually, this is very similar to the previous one, as in, it's also a series of caves that also spawns a lot of these spider enemies. And just like the previous one, this one also makes the bigger ones to explode and unleash smaller spiderlings that also give you that nice bonus XP. But unlike the previous dungeon, I found that the enemies here are a bit more squishy, so more easily to defeat, especially since it spawns quite a few of these clouds of insects that are quite easy to take down. But once you reach the second portion of this dungeon, you're gonna have to take down some of these, I believe, blisters or corpse piles, whatever they are called. And once you do that, a whole bunch of enemies will spawn out of them. And not only that, these enemies further spawn all enemies once you defeat them. Again, a lot of poison resistance here is advised because otherwise you can really get destroyed by it. Unfortunately, one of our favorite spots, which is Champion's Demise, this was used by pretty much everybody to level up to 100, has seen quite a bit of the nerf hammer recently, and most recently today, since now the pack sizes are obviously way smaller than before. Now, I can't really put my finger on it if it's like 30% or 50% lower, but it definitely is significant. So it's still going to give you a large number of enemies, maybe more than most dungeons, but significantly lower than what it did before. Is it still an efficient way of farming? Well, I guess it is, because it's not like we have many other choices in there that give you such an abundance of enemies. But I would still maybe recommend doing it in nightmare mode, or maybe go with some friends to be a bit more efficient, or even more so, just try out some of the previous two that haven't seen the nerf hammer just yet. Now, there's one more that I didn't cover, and that's the Ruins of Eridu, which is something that we covered previously, and you can also find this in the Howitzer region. Now, this is something that doesn't have a nightmare dungeon, which unfortunately makes it kinda useless past level 75, and that's because you can no longer make it spawn enemies higher level than you, and this means no longer having that 25% extra XP boost. So this is something I only recommend to characters up to level 75 or when leveling up an alt. Until then, use some of the other methods. Now, once it does get cycled in the next batch of Nightmare Dungeons, which is hopefully going to be with Season 1, and assuming it's not going to get nerfed, this might end up being the best in terms of XP farms, as long as the consistency and the number of enemies remains unchanged. And this, ladies and gents, brings us to the final method, which is going to completely power level any of your other characters to World Tier 4 in no more than 1 hour. But you're kinda going to need a friend for this, or a second account like how I do. I don't recommend buying a second account just for this, so just ask a friend, or maybe ask in the comments below, or just like reach out to the community. Somebody is going to eventually help you. But in this case, what you need is a level max character, or something that's at least level like 70 or 80 and easily able to clear World Tier 4, and a low level character such as an alt. In this case, we're gonna place both of these characters on World Tier 2, because we need to first do the Capstone Nightmare and the Torment dungeons for the low level character. Luckily, there's no level cap for that, so we can literally do that from level 1. So in this case, we're gonna start with the one in Kyovashad with the Cathedral of Light. Now, as you can see right here, the amount of XP that I am gaining on this second character as my first one clears the dungeon and just completes the challenge is absolutely ridiculous. We're literally doing this in minutes and gaining like, I don't know, 7 levels in like 4 minutes, like it's nothing, and you'll see even more in just a little bit. And once it's done with all of that, the Cathedral of Light is done, and congrats, you just got a level 10 character being capable of playing the Nightmare difficulty. But it doesn't stop there, because we're gonna then use this to jump straight into Torment. So from this point on, you're gonna want to take your high level character or max level character into the Fallen Temple and push onto the Torment difficulty, and also just jump through the portal from the second character straight into it. From this point on, the process remains exactly the same. You will leave the low level character at the start of the dungeon, just so to avoid any unnecessary deaths, and the main character will go and completely clear out this dungeon, hopefully in no more than a few minutes. Like I said, the XP boost here is absolutely insane, and once again you can easily jump like 7 more levels like it's nothing in no more than 5 minutes, depending on your clearing speed. And once you're done with that, the true end game actually begins, and the one that's going to give you even faster levels than before. Because once you're done with this, you can go back and change the low level character to the Torment difficulty and grab that 200% extra XP from it. This leaves us with only one more thing to do, and that is to bring these characters in any of the previously mentioned World Tier 4 dungeons, be it Nightmare or not. It doesn't matter, because the low level character will be like 70 levels below those anyways. But the XP gains are going to be off the chart, because you're going to get them literally every few seconds, to the point that by the time you're even finished with this dungeon, you might have gained like 15 to 20 levels, and that's for just like 3 or 4 minutes of farming. Plus, if you also take a stroll through the dungeon and collect the loot that dropped from the enemies, you can already get a full equipping set by level 50 and get ready with a bunch of items to truly progress in the end game. And this takes, by the way, no more than 1 hour, and from that point on you can just resume going into the end game, pushing up nightmare dungeons and playing the world challenges and some of the other content and get another class ready. And this is pretty much it with it. Let me know down below if you ever tested this or if you played it yourself. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.